The statements, I call the member for Maitland.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. I extend my congratulations to the Maitland Regional Museum and all of its members and recognise their achievement in obtaining an Anzac Community Grant, which aims to provide funding for projects that commemorate and recognise the service and sacrifices of our current and former servicemen and women. In previous years, the Maitland community has been successful in applying for these grants. In 2015-16, the East Maitland RSL sub-branch secured funding for 50 RSL members to visit the National Maritime Museum and the RSL sub-branch of New South Wales. And I'm especially excited that the museum has been successful in securing a grant to commemorate the 100-year centenary of the Battle of Passchendaele with a focus on the service of the 34th Australian Infantry Battalion. In fact, a meeting was held for planning this commemoration today in Maitland, Mr Acting Speaker, which I was not able to attend, but it is a very important battalion for Maitland. The 34th Battalion departed for Europe in May 1916, and they participated in their first major battle in June 1917 at the Battle of Messines, which was 100 years ago this month. Now, during a ceremony to acknowledge the Maitland Regional Museum's grant, I said a few words, and acknowledging country, I noted the importance of recognising the contribution of our Indigenous peoples in the war service of our nation. And I think that it's really important to do that. As we saw in the recent Anzac Day commentary, a discussion in our wider community about including Aboriginal people in our Anzac commemorations has been had. In fact, just this year in Canberra, after the dawn service, there was a special commemoration ceremony for our Indigenous peoples. Aboriginal soldiers and those from the Torres Strait Islands have served in every Australian conflict since at least 1901, and over 1,000 Indigenous soldiers fought in World War I, although some who tried to enlist were denied that right due to their race. Another 3,000 Indigenous soldiers were estimated to have fought in World War II. So it's very important that whenever we speak about Anzac, we acknowledge our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, and we acknowledge them and their service when we talk about the service history of our nation. The 34th Battalion was colloquially known as Maitland's Own. They were named as such as it was planned that the bulk of these men would come and be resourced from around the Maitland area. However, as it turned out, the first recruits for the battalion were from the northwest of New South Wales after they joined the recruiting march at Walgett. These men were colloquially known as the Wallabies, and together with the recruits from Maitland, they made up the 34th. In fact, in researching where our 34th Battalion came from, I read the story of a highly educated Aboriginal man, Douglas Grant, who was born in Queensland and was eventually raised by a Scottish immigrant scientist of the name of Robert Grant. Grant settled with his foster father in Lithgow, went to Scots College in Sydney and trained as a mechanical draftsman. According to the Australian War Memorial, when the First World War broke out, Grant managed to enlist with the 34th Battalion in January 1916. However, as he was about to leave Australia, the Aboriginal Protection Board intervened, noting that regulations prevented Aboriginals from leaving the country without government approval. Undeterred, Grant enlisted again, and this time successfully embarked with the 13th Battalion in August. It continues that Grant was a well-educated, articulate man with a thick Scottish accent. To his comrades, however, he was cherished as a remarkable figure who proved to be both honest and quick-witted. After 2 years as a prisoner of war and after his repatriation to Australia, Grant went on to lobby for Aboriginal rights and also became active in returned service persons affairs. And as this story shows, it's important to recognise the participation of everyone in our community in the Anzac story, even those who may have had to have gone a longer route to get there because of discrimination that they may have suffered at the time. And it's important to note that it's only when we hear their stories in retrospect that we see the impact of discrimination and the loss we suffer as a community when not everyone is able to participate. It will be very good to hear the many stories that the Maitland Regional Museum will uncover in their research on the 34th Battalion. I look forward to hearing more interesting stories which will again inform our future as we look back at our past and the mistakes that have been made. The Maitland Regional Museum is doing a fantastic job of preserving, collating and presenting our history, even as challenged as they are by not having a permanent space. I once again congratulate the Maitland Regional Museum on successfully obtaining an Anzac Community Grant, and I look forward to viewing the exhibition when it is open. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker,